Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Retro Tech Hunting. Now in the last video, as you guys remember, if you saw that one, we hit up a bunch of local thrift stores and found some somewhat interesting items like another tripod for the channel, an old composite monitor, and a cassette tape that was kind of cool. And we also hit up this vintage video game store, or a couple of them in a different area, and found some other interesting items. And ended up purchasing a few vintage video games here. Anyway, just one little anecdote too I have on that video. Some of you might remember when I found this little device here, and I had no idea what it was. Well, it turns out my friend Charlie from the YouTube channel Master Gecko 4 actually did know what this was, and it turns out this is actually a travel alarm clock that was given out by Delta Airlines. So that's kind of cool to learn, and for anybody who was wondering what that device was, I guess you now know too. Anyway though, back with today's thrift store trip. So, we ended up heading to a local Goodwill, but it was also 10 minutes before closing time, so we really had to rush to find what we wanted to get here and see if there's anything interesting. We'll go ahead and walk in the door and head right back to the electronics section as usual. Today I seem to notice an unusual surge in interesting electronic gadgets. I mean, for one, we had these pills here, which admittedly aren't that interesting, as well as this Blu-ray player, but just to the right of all of those was this. This caught my eye as it's one of those wood grain radio clocks that you seem to see showing up at thrift stores all the time. And one day I'd love to grab one of these, however, today I just wasn't in the mood for a wood grain radio clock, so I ended up passing on it. However, what I saw next to that though really grabbed my eye. It was a gray box, and this gray box turned out to be a Smith & Corona word processor. And this is one of the models that has built-in daisy wheel printer as well, so that's pretty cool too. I ended up picking this up. Anyway, just to the right of that was a paperweight calculator. Well, actually, the box was kind of empty, but it would have been interesting to see if maybe that was floating around somewhere. I kind of wonder if I might have missed out on that. Anyway, over here, as you can see here, appears to be another typical Goodwill cooking appliance, as well as a hoverboard, which actually we picked up and it turned out to work. So that was definitely a really nice find. However, then I saw something that I found very oddly humorous. It's another one of these VHS camcorders. Now, if you saw the first part of my thrifting series, you know that I found one of these at a different thrift store right next to this one. However, I decided I'd pass on this one too. Eventually I'd like to get one of these and make a video on it, but I decided that now wasn't the time, and there were other interesting things I wanted to pick up today instead, and so I decided to just leave this here. This one does though happen to be a Sharp unit instead of a GE one. Anyway, past another set of computer or car pedals, I found what I thought at first was an antique radio. However, immediately I noticed that something was off. It turns out this has a compact disc player in it, which, as you can tell, is not something you find typically on antique radios. And it turns out this is one of those radios that's designed to look old, but is actually just, you know, a new radio crammed into an old-looking case. And I probably wouldn't have bought it anyway. Looking up above here, I found something that was a little bit more down my alley, and that was one of these Atari flashback consoles. Now, these are just any of those generic remake consoles that feature all the games built into ROM or something to that effect. However, I've never really found these to be particularly interesting or really that good of quality, and it's not really something that I just have much of an interest in, so I decided that for the time being I was going to pass on this. I could probably find one at a local gaming store for maybe 12 bucks or something like that. Anyway, I was looking at some old HP inkjet printer cartridges that somebody thought they could sell here when I looked down and saw this beautiful case, and I always check cases as you never know what you find inside, and in this one I happened to find a beautiful old mechanical typewriter. Immediately I noticed that the ink ribbon had been removed and placed across the keyboard, and there were a few other things that were just kind of not right about it, but after unjamming the keys and fixing the ink ribbon, it seemed to work just fine. Not that really much goes wrong with these mechanical typewriters anyway, but yeah, there's a little bit of ink on the keys from the ink ribbon falling onto the keyboard, but overall I think this is a definite buy for me. I'm definitely going to end up picking this up. So anyway, I saw this other case here that was on the bottom of the end cap, and you would be darned to find that this was actually another one of those frickin' VHS camcorders. I'm not sure what it is with these things, but they seem to be showing up everywhere in any thrift store I visited recently, so maybe I will have to pick one of these up someday. I also found this neat little handheld radio, as well as just a generic DSLR camera, but then I found this, which was kind of interesting. It appears to be a really old film camera of some kind. Checking the cable section, there were a few miscellaneous controllers, but then I found something that kind of caught my eye. It's this mid-90s, I would guess, Logitech TrackMan device. I guess it's just some kind of PS2 trackball, but I was kind of in need of some kind of external PS2 pointing devices. I don't really have too many working ones, and I have a old laptop that I need an external mouse for, as the built-in trackball isn't really the best. So yeah, I decided I'd pick this up, as well as the typewriter, and of course I went back over here and grabbed this awesome little word processor, so I just couldn't let this thing sit here, and I really wanted to mess around with one. Anyway, so now that we're back, it's time to go ahead and do some restoration work on this typewriter. Now this one needed a lot of cleaning, as it had the ink ribbon sitting on the keyboard and part of the housing for a period of time when it was all tangled up. And speaking of that, I did have to untangle and reroute this ink ribbon here and prevent it from getting tangled up between all the key striker arms and everything else in the typewriter. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. Fortunately, this didn't take too long. And with that small bit of maintenance done, the typewriter works fine. Now, typing on a typewriter is a little bit different than typing on a normal computer keyboard, so I'm not as fast here and I often get the strikers stuck, but the typewriter itself is working fine regardless of my lack of skill. As for the electric typewriter, it also works fine and basically required no maintenance. I'll go ahead and turn it on and type out a few sentences here on the paper. As you can see, the ink is really crisp, and it turns out this is actually because this typewriter uses a type of single-use ink, probably some kind of thermal transfer or graphite related thing. So basically this means that unlike the older typewriter, once you reach the end of the ribbon, that's it, you'll have to get a new ribbon. So for that reason, I typically avoid using this one as much as the other one. As for the trackball I got, it did work, and I actually used it while working on the Windows 98 gaming PC I made a video about earlier this year. However, for some reason, it had issues working on the laptop I intended to use it with, and I don't know why, probably a driver issue or something like that. Unfortunately, that laptop is dead and in need of repair now, so I'll have to do further work on that laptop before trying it again. And with that said, here's pretty much everything I picked up for this thrifting trip. And honestly, quite a good haul in my opinion. And that basically wraps up for today's episode of Retro Computer Hunting. I think we found a lot of really cool stuff in today's video. I mean, for one, these typewriters are always fun to find. I mean, these are cool to mess around with, and I didn't already have one, so, you know, it's definitely an interesting thing to now have. And we also found that really neat electric typewriter, as well as that very useful trackball. I can't believe now that we're finally over 300 subscribers and still growing. As a matter of fact, today we hit 315, so we're already well on our way to 400 as well. So if you're new here, be sure to click the subscribe button. It's completely free and it helps me out a lot with creating these videos, as well as just gives me a tiny little motivation boost. But before we wrap this video up, one more really cool thing I want to point out regarding today's thrifting video. You know that picture I just showed of all the items that I had on the desk? Well, it turns out if you've seen LGR's latest thrift videos, you've actually already seen that picture. As a matter of fact, it made it into the viewer submission. So big thanks to Clint from LGR for putting that in there, and it was really cool to see my items in his video. But that's basically it for today. So with that out of the way, it's time to go ahead and cue the first section of our own viewer submissions. And by the way, if you do want to submit viewer submissions to the Retro Computer Hunting series here I do, be sure to either join the Discord server and submit it in the Cool and Rare Computer Finds channel, or just get in contact with me any other way you prefer to do so and send me whatever picture you want. I'm not pushing anybody, but it does make for a really cool thing to show at the end of these videos. So, that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and cue today's viewer submissions.